8 years ago, a man happened upon a foal, barely clinging to life in the harsh wilderness. Without hesitation, he chose to save the fragile creature. As time passed, the story seemed destined to fade into obscurity, until one fateful day when the horse returned. What it did left everyone not only astonished but deeply moved to tears. What happened between them during those long years apart? Before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel HP Life Story. Thank you for your support. Dr. Johnny Depp never imagined he would one day earn the nickname, the Horse Whisperer in Kenya. 20 years ago, he was a promising veterinary student in California, focused on caring for small animals rather than larger ones like horses. But 3 months as a volunteer at the Masai Mara Wildlife Reserve completely changed the course of his life. Now at 52, with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands, Johnny's appearance tells the story of 2 decades dedicated to healing wild horses, one of the great symbols of the African savanna. Locals call him the father of the horses, despite him never having children of his own. Johnny's home is a modest research station on the edge of Masai Mara National Park. Its walls are covered with X-rays of horse injuries, behavior charts, and hundreds of photographs documenting the animals he has treated. He has sacrificed the comforts of conventional life to pursue this mission. A failed marriage, missed family events in the US, and the security of a stable career, all left behind. Yet Johnny has found something more meaningful, a profound connection with creatures whose intelligence and emotions continue to astound him. His greatest challenge came in 2016. A 4-year-old foal had become ensnared in a poacher's barbed wire, suffering severe injuries and life-threatening infections. His colleagues recommended euthanasia, but the horse's eyes struck a deep chord in Johnny. He named the foal Upendo, meaning love in Swahili, and spent 3 months nursing it back to health before releasing it into the wild. Dr. Noah Harrison, the reserve's director, often said Johnny had an uncanny ability to read the minds of horses. During Upendo's recovery, a bond formed that defied all scientific explanation. One ordinary summer day in 2024, Johnny was reviewing medical records at the reserve when a radio call came through from Liam, a ranger. "Dr. Depp, you need to see this. There's a large stallion behaving strangely near the eastern fence. It's been standing there for hours as if waiting for something." Curious and slightly uneasy, Johnny stepped outside into the blazing Masai Mara sun. The golden savanna stretched endlessly before him, dotted with low shrubs and golden grasses swaying in the wind. He climbed into his old pickup truck, its engine rumbling against the vast, quiet expanse, and headed toward the eastern fence. From a distance he spotted the stallion. It stood motionless, seemingly indifferent to his approach. As Johnny drew closer, a wave of familiarity washed over him. The stallion's reddish-brown coat shimmered under the harsh sunlight, and its deep, soulful eyes seemed to pierce straight through him. Then it hit him. This wasn't just any horse. It was Upendo, the same horse he had saved 8 years ago. Johnny's heart tightened. Upendo wasn't fearful or agitated. Instead, its gaze seemed to convey a message, as if it had been waiting for him. Johnny cautiously approached, keeping a respectful distance to avoid startling the horse. "What are you doing here, Upendo?" he whispered, his voice tinged with emotion. To Johnny's amazement, Upendo began tracing shapes in the dusty ground with its hoof. Simple forms like circles, triangles, and squares, eerily reminiscent of the cognitive exercises Johnny had used during the foal's rehabilitation. But this time, the shapes were more intricate, as though Upendo was demonstrating its growth and intelligence. "Liam," Johnny whispered into his radio, "are you recording this?" The patterns Upendo created were far from random. They formed a progressive geometric sequence, a clear indication of cognitive thought that no one had ever attributed to a horse before. Dr. Noah's voice crackled through the radio, brimming with excitement. "Johnny, according to our tracking data, this horse matches the migration route we've been following. It's traveled over 1,000 kilometers to reach this exact location. This isn't a coincidence. This is intentional. Johnny now faced a decision that challenged every conservation principle. Protocol dictated maintaining a strict distance from wild stallions, particularly dominant ones like Upendo. But his scientific instincts urged him to seize this rare opportunity to explore equine cognition and emotional memory. "I'm going out there," Johnny declared, ignoring his colleagues' protests. Upendo had not only recognized him but was displaying a level of intelligence never before documented. His decision sparked a flurry of activity at the reserve. Research teams scrambled to set up observation equipment, while news of the horse's extraordinary behavior quickly spread through the scientific community. As Johnny approached Upendo, his heart pounded. Up close, he confirmed what he already knew: the scar on its shoulder, the markings on its legs, and a distinctive nick on its mane all pointed to one conclusion. This was undoubtedly Upendo, the foal he had once saved. When Johnny was just 6 meters away, Upendo performed an act that left every observer speechless. Using its hoof, it drew a shape on the ground that mirrored the scar from its surgery 8 years ago, as if to commemorate their unique bond. While the reunion of Johnny and Upendo captured global attention, Dr. Noah discovered something equally astonishing. Through tracking data, he realized that Upendo's herd had been systematically visiting rehabilitation camps across the region. Each visit coincided with the presence of horses that had previously undergone rehabilitation in those areas. Dr. Laura Tipton from the University of Cambridge, an expert in cognition, arrived to study Upendo's behavior further. Her team discovered that the shapes Upendo was drawing were not merely memories, but a complex form of communication. These geometric patterns corresponded to specific events in Upendo's rehabilitation process, revealing an impressive capacity for abstract thought in horses. Even more fascinating, other horses in Upendo's herd began displaying similar behaviors. 2 young mares, who had never experienced rehabilitation themselves, were observed drawing simplified versions of Upendo's patterns. This suggested learning and knowledge transmission among the herd members. This story sparked a major shift in the research conducted at the sanctuary. Elders from local villages also shared traditional tales of extraordinary teacher horses capable of connecting humans and animals. What was once considered a myth was now being examined through a serious scientific lens. Johnny and his team began documenting similar cases across Africa, discovering that rehabilitated horses not only remembered their experiences, but actively taught their herds how to engage positively with humans. In the weeks that followed, the bond between Johnny and the wild horse named Upendo deepened in ways that defied conventional scientific understanding of wildlife behavior. Each morning, Upendo waited at the sanctuary's boundary, engaging in increasingly complex forms of interaction. Dr. Tipton's team recorded over 50 distinct behaviors from Upendo, expressed through hoof markings on the ground, each with specific meanings in different contexts. The extraordinary connection between Johnny and Upendo became a bridge between the human world and the wild. Upendo's markings were not only directed at specific herd members but also seemed to narrate their stories. Young foals observed these interactions with visible curiosity, with some even attempting to imitate both Upendo's markings and Johnny's responses. Dr. Noah, initially skeptical, became one of the strongest advocates of the findings. He explained to visiting researchers that what they were witnessing was not merely equine intelligence, but the evolution of a shared language, a deliberate effort by both species to understand one another. Other horses at the sanctuary also began responding more positively to Johnny. Mares, typically wary when their foals were nearby, became noticeably more trusting in Upendo's presence. Remarkably, Upendo started bringing injured horses to the sanctuary's boundary, using hoof markings to indicate the type and location of their injuries. This transformed the sanctuary's approach to medical care for wild horses, allowing Johnny to understand not just the content but also the emotional context of Upendo's communication. Local communities were also impacted by this relationship. Members of the Maasai tribe, who had once viewed wild horses as threats, began collaborating with the sanctuary, sharing their traditional knowledge about equine behavior, insights they had gleaned through observing Upendo's actions. Legends of horses as bridges between humans and animals, once told by elders, were brought to life again through Upendo. The defining moment came during one of the worst droughts Kenya had faced in decades. One morning, Upendo approached the sanctuary with a palpable sense of urgency, using unfamiliar markings to signal that something was wrong with his herd, 20 miles beyond the sanctuary's borders. Dr. Tipton's team deciphered the message. A group of horses, including foals, was trapped in deep mud caused by a dried-up riverbed. Johnny faced a critical decision: follow Upendo into unprotected land, violating safety protocols, or ignore the plea for help. The urgency of Upendo's communication compelled him to act. Within an hour, Johnny assembled a rescue team, including veterinarians, researchers, and guides from the Masai Mara sanctuary. They found 15 horses, including 4 foals, exhausted and trapped in the mud for over 2 weeks. Most astonishingly, Upendo led the entire rescue operation. He indicated where to place equipment for leverage, used his hoof to signal safe paths through the mud, and identified horses requiring immediate care. Remarkably, Upendo even seemed to coordinate the use of rescue tools, leveraging his strength to assist in pulling ropes and winches alongside the team. The operation garnered international attention, but also sparked controversy. Some conservationists argued that such close interactions between humans and wildlife set a dangerous precedent. Others suggested that Johnny was anthropomorphizing Upendo's behavior. The debate reached its peak when the International Wildlife Conservation Council announced an urgent review of the sanctuary's practices. Dr. Noah and Johnny presented their case before a panel of experts in Kenya, armed with months of evidence showcasing Upendo's exceptional abilities. What we're witnessing is not just learned behavior, Johnny argued, presenting videos of Upendo performing complex tasks. This is deliberate intelligence. Upendo is not merely recalling his rehabilitation, but is actively creating new ways to connect humans and animals. The breakthrough came when Dr. Tipton presented her analysis of Upendo's communication patterns, using AI-assisted pattern recognition technology. Her team documented over 200 distinct signals in Upendo's behavior, each consistently meaningful across various contexts. The likelihood of such occurrences being random was virtually zero. However, the most compelling evidence came from global reports observing similar behaviors in rehabilitated horses. In Mongolia, a horse led its herd to avoid poachers' traps. In Spain, another taught its herd how to safely interact with humans. Local communities, including the Maasai, contributed crucial evidence from their traditional knowledge about the intelligence of horses. These observations, once dismissed by Western science, were now validated by modern research methods. Dr. Noah proposed a revolutionary approach to wildlife conservation, a collaborative model that acknowledged the active role of horses in protecting themselves. "We don't just share territory," he explained. "We share knowledge, communication, and responsibility for coexistence." The Council's final decision transformed conservation policy, designating the reserve as a hub for interspecies communication research, led by Johnny and Dr. Tipton in a pioneering field known as collaborative conservation. Upendo's herd became the first officially recognized partner in conservation efforts. A year later, the reserve was elevated to the International Institute for Equine Communication Research. Upendo's role had shifted from a patient to a mentor. He often led other herd members to a designated area of the reserve designed for safe communication between humans and horses. Foals learned to execute communication patterns under Upendo's guidance, while researchers documented their progress. The greatest breakthrough came when Upendo began teaching stallions from other herds. These individuals traveled long distances to learn, and then returned to their herds to share the knowledge. Gradually, a network of communication between humans and horses began to take shape across East Africa. Reflecting on his journey, Johnny admitted, "We didn't just save Upendo's life. We helped him build a bridge between humans and animals, and he chose to do it, not just for himself, but for the future of both species. The relationship between the Maasai community and horses also underwent profound change. Young villagers, who once proved their bravery by chasing wild horses, were now trained as communication interpreters, working alongside horses and humans to safeguard shared resources. The fusion of traditional knowledge and modern science created a sustainable conservation model. Dr. Tipton's research revealed that horses' capacity for abstract thought far exceeded prior estimates. The spatial patterns they employed were not mere symbols, but components of a developing language. This language integrated spatial relationships, temporal concepts, and even emotional states. Each new generation of horses added to this vocabulary, creating an increasingly sophisticated medium of communication that transcended species boundaries. Johnny stood under the shade of a large acacia tree in the reserve, the afternoon sun filtering through its leaves and casting shimmering patterns on the ground. He gazed into the distance, where horses roamed freely across the grasslands. Among them, Upendo stood out with his glossy chestnut coat and commanding presence, exuding the confidence of a leader. Upendo was not just a horse. He was a friend, a teacher, and a being who had fundamentally changed Johnny's perception of the world. Johnny recalled the day they first met 8 years ago. He had discovered Upendo as a frail, malnourished foal, barely clinging to life by the edge of a dry riverbed in the arid plains. The foal's eyes were filled with fear and helplessness, yet beneath it lay a faint glimmer of hope. Johnny had brought water and food, tending to the foal's needs one small step at a time. Day by day, Upendo regained his strength. Saving the young horse was not merely an act of kindness. It awakened in Johnny a profound bond with the natural world. Over time, Johnny realized he was learning as much from the horses as he was teaching them. These creatures, often regarded as purely instinctual, exhibited intelligence and sensitivity that few humans could comprehend. They led him to hidden water sources he had never discovered before. They navigated their environment with an innate understanding, predicting weather changes through subtle behavioral cues. One day, when storm clouds loomed on the horizon, Johnny noticed Upendo and his herd moving eastward. Trusting their instincts, he followed and found a flowing river, essential for sustaining the reserve through the dry season. But Upendo's contributions went beyond navigation. On every regular visit, he brought something new. He not only communicated with his herd but also interacted meaningfully with humans, seemingly understanding the language and signals used by Johnny and his research team. In the golden hours of the evening, Johnny often stood at a distance, watching Upendo guide the young foals in navigating safely and finding food and water. What astonished him most was Upendo's ability to teach his herd to engage with the researchers. It was an unprecedented collaboration, where humans and animals truly understood and worked alongside each other. The story of Johnny and Upendo spread rapidly, becoming a symbol of hope for conservation communities worldwide. Their fateful encounter redefined the concept of wildlife preservation. It was no longer about humans protecting other species, but about species collaborating to safeguard their shared environment. Upendo, once a fragile foal, had become a teacher and a bridge between nature and humanity. One golden afternoon, as the sunlight bathed the grasslands, Johnny watched Upendo standing among the foals. The horse lowered his head and flicked his mane as if signaling, and the foals paid rapt attention. They seemed to listen to every move, learning to use sounds and body language to communicate with the researchers nearby. Johnny felt a profound peace, a moment where he knew that humans and animals could coexist and learn from each other. Johnny slowly sat down, his heart filled with gratitude. He realized that the miracle was not just in Upendo remembering him and coming back, but in the way it chose to use that memory to build an entirely new future. Johnny often shared this story with his students. He told them that the most astonishing scientific discoveries don't come from asking questions or searching for data, but from being open to learning from the creatures we think we are teaching. In the stillness of the afternoon, Johnny smiled as he watched Upendo leading the young horses across the field. He knew that from one small act of compassion, they had together transformed not only their own world, but also the lives of many others. The story of Johnny and Upendo is just one of countless examples proving that the natural world is full of lessons we have yet to uncover. So, what do you think? If you found yourself in a moment like Johnny's, would you have the patience and open heart to embrace such a miracle? We'd love to hear your thoughts or stories. Share them in the comments below. And if you found this story thought-provoking, don't hesitate to share it to spread inspiration to others. Who knows, a small action you take today might create a greater miracle tomorrow.